Okay, so I had this panic attack condition, and I was called on in English to read out loud. So I started reading out loud, and I started having a panic attack. And, a big part of it is this audio hallucination I was getting. It sounded like a waterfall. Um, in some ways it intensifies your hearing too. But I'm having this panic attack, and I'm trying to read out loud, and I can't really even hear my own voice. And I get the impression that I sound like I'm cracking up, like I'm about to start crying. It's just really horrible. And then all of a sudden the bell rang. So I was like, oh, thank goodness. Now, I didn't have any friends or associates in that class, so I was never able to ask anyone what it sounded like. But that was tough. But the reason that I'm telling this story and what this has to do with LSD is that I was able to cure myself of the panic attack condition. So I thought maybe it'd be helpful if I told the story. In case you have a panic attack condition, maybe it could be helpful. You may be like me, maybe you haven't told anyone about it. Uh, or maybe you'll develop one in the future. But what I found was that during my free periods, I'd go to the library, and one book I'd like to look at was this reference book about drugs. And it wasn't a propaganda, anti-drug propaganda book. It was just sort of like the facts about drugs. And one time I was reading in that book, and I was reading this bad trip report that this guy had made. And what he had done was he had made a cold water extract of morning glory seeds. And these things have LSA in them. And apparently what he did was he let it evaporate down to a thicker consistency, and then he injected it intravenously. And he gave a very good description of what happened. It was very horrible. Just a horrible, horrible, horrible trip. And when I was reading it, I noticed that I started to have a panic attack. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Then another day I was reading this book, and I came to it, and I read it again. And I noticed, well, I had a panic attack again. So then I was starting to realize that, my panic attacks were probably coming to an end now, because I found this way of triggering them consistently. And I continued to read this bad trip report from time to time. And I did notice that the panic attacks were becoming less severe. And I also got the feeling that they were about to go away, and they were never going to come back. And they never have. It's been over 30 years. So I probably read the bad trip report maybe 4 or 5 times, something like that. I was cured. Just like that. So in the event that you do have a panic attack condition, my solution that I stumbled on was finding something that triggered it, and just triggering it, and just analyzing it, and saying what's going on here, why is this happening? Now I found the whole experience probably essentially it was just like part of growing up. That's the way I look at it. It does seem to have inoculated me against panic attacks, which is what I thought was happening. And it does seem to have proven true. So all in all, that wasn't such a bad experience for me. So, I would say that was a bad trip. That was one of 4 bad trips that I've had. And that was marijuana, and possibly the zinc oxide was a factor. So another one was later, when I was in college. Someone made marijuana brownies. I'd never eaten hash brownies or marijuana brownies before. I didn't know how long they took to take effect. I don't really know how long they take to take effect, but I was eating quite a few of them, thinking that they weren't working. I just hadn't given them time. So when they did start working, I got a really pleasant body high. So I did consider that to be very unpleasant, and I did consider that to be a bad trip. It really doesn't have anything. I can't tie it in with the discussion about LSD, but it was fairly interesting. I was sitting on my friend's chair that was like a sling. It had leather slings for the seat, the back, and the armrests. And I don't know if it had something to do with this chair, but I was getting the impression that everything I could see was made out of rubber, like solid rubber. Like if it fell on the floor, it would just bounce or something. So I was getting this distinct illusion or whatever. And then I was able to, it took a long time for it to wear off, I guess. But it was just an unpleasant body high. I don't know how I could really describe it. I can't even really remember it, but I just remember not liking it. So the other 2 bad trips both involved salvia, which was in this period from like 18 months to 2 years ago, when I was I was trying some legal highs. So I tried salvia, and I hadn't really looked into it that much before I ordered it, so I ordered some 20X. And then when I was waiting for it to come, I looked into it more, and I realized that I should have ordered 5X. But I was like, whatever. So then when it came, I tried it, and the first impression I got was, oh, this stuff's annoying. Once my vision started to vibrate, I was like, oh, it's really annoying. And then I got hit by this really, really unpleasant head rush. And there was this noise in my head, like that. And it was just, I felt like all these assholes were like streaming through my head. It was like all these assholes. It was like really evil. And there were like 2 assholes like right next to me like this going. And so I was just sitting there, and I knew I was going to have to wait. I was like, okay, I heard. But by this time, I had read up enough about salvia that I knew that it could be quite unpleasant. Another thing I was getting was this feeling on my arms, like anywhere where you get goose pimples. To me, it felt like it was a totally new sensation. I'd never had it before. Sort of felt like maybe a bit of a carpet burn, something like that, on that area of my arms. But it was a totally new sensation. It was quite strange. A little bit unpleasant. Another thing I was getting on salvia was this feeling that I was being grabbed all over my chest and being yanked on really hard. I was also like being pushed back. But you do get tactile hallucinations on salvia. I think it's salvia is different. I wouldn't really consider it to be a psychedelic myself. It's totally unique, I think, in terms of the receptors that it works on. I've also heard it said that the active ingredient of salvia is more powerful than LSD. which would essentially make it the most powerful psychoactive drug. I took a larger bong hit the next time with the salvia because I was like, I was going to throw it away. But I just wanted to check to make sure whether or not there were any closed-eye visuals, because I hadn't noticed any the first time. In a second, I got the exact same thing, but it was worse and it was longer. And I got no closed-eye visuals whatsoever. So if you do want to play around with salvia, you definitely want to start very weak stuff. And I think that salvia will get you if you play around with it. So I'd stay away from salvia myself. Yeah. Yeah, I'd stay away from salvia. There's nothing there, really.